My name is Kathleen Reen. I'm Vice President for Internet Initiatives, Asia Programs and Environment Programs at Internews, which is an international development non-profit devoted to independent media and IT support all around the world. We're here this morning to talk about new frontiers in citizen journalism. There have been extraordinary changes in the world of storytelling in the last 5 years, and especially in the last 2, given political events in the Middle East and around the world. And while much controversy persists around what comprises good journalism, what is and who are citizen journalists, there's absolutely no doubting the volume of the stories and the trajectory, which tells us that storytelling will continue to proliferate and expand. And with that, new platforms, new opportunities, new ways for that storytelling to expand and continue around the world. So we thought that we would take an opportunity together to share some of the new opportunities that are out there, some of the new technological breakthroughs, and some of the new methodologies that are being deployed to take advantage of what's happening on social media around the world, to take advantage of what's happening with technology, and to take advantage of new skill sets being developed among the young in countries everywhere. So with that, let me introduce Burt Herman. Burt is the founder of Storify and Hackers. He's joined us from San Francisco, but has worked internationally quite a lot as a journalist, including in Afghanistan. We have Sahar, Habib Ghazi from Hosh Media. She hails from Pakistan. She's a journalist also, but has started her own platform and her own news initiative, and she'll be talking about how she works with citizen journalists in Pakistan. With her is Kolsoom Lakhani. Kolsoom is the founder of Invest to Innovate, and she'll be talking about how venture capital and social entrepreneurship and investment are really changing the face of journalism and what the new opportunities and challenges are for small businesses and new ways of funding journalism around the world. And then we have Ruby Tugade, and Ruby manages the news vertical at Ustream and works a lot with citizen journalists around the world. And she'll be telling us a little bit about her work and the power of live, what happens with live video and how it's a real game changer for storytelling everywhere, and some of the threats and challenges that she's seen in the last 12 months, even in the last 6. So with that, we'll start with Burt. Burt, thank you.
Thank you. This photo is just kind of a little proof to show that I was working as a regular journalist for many years, as Kathleen said, around the world for the Associated Press. I was a bureau chief and correspondent, and this happens to be in Iraq during the 2003 war when I was embedded with the U.S. Marines. And this is a missile that was being hidden under a soccer stadium, actually, which is not any WMD. We did not secretly find these and cover it up. But just so you know. The AP once boasted that it's the world's largest news organization because they have thousands of reporters all around the world in all major world capitals. But obviously what we've seen over the last few years is that through technology, through smartphones, cameras, wireless internet, 3G, all social platforms like Twitter, Flickr, YouTube, Instagram, everybody now is kind of effectively a reporter. And this photo really, to me, draws the point home. I mean, I'm sure many people recognize this as the plane that landed in the Hudson River in New York, which, there was somebody on one of these ferries that went out to rescue the plane. He took a photo, news organizations picked this up, and it was seen all around the world. There's always going to be somebody now at the scene of any news event reporting on what happens, and that's really an amazing opportunity, I think, for journalism to use this information as a source. At the same time, there is so much out there, right? There is on Twitter, they said recently that there's 1 billion tweets sent every 3 days. YouTube just announced a new milestone that there's 72 hours of video uploaded every minute to YouTube. Facebook, obviously, people are sharing hundreds of millions of photos there. So there's great, and important things within this huge stream of media, but how do we find it? How do we make sense of it? And I think it comes through a few different developments. One thing that I think is key in this, and as was mentioned, I started this group called Hacks and Hackers, which is all about bringing together journalists and technologists. And I think, this is part of it, is figuring out ways that journalists and developers can work together to help sift through all this information, come up with new ways of telling stories using technology to get the most out of this. And this group began a couple of years ago as a small meetup in San Francisco, and actually has now grown to this international organization. We have chapters on 4 continents. We have people setting them up across Africa and South America, in Europe, in the US, and North America. So clearly there's a hunger for this, I think, out there. It shows that people want to bring these things together and figure out where we're going with media, because we are in this time of amazing opportunity where really everything is being shaken up and old media, large organizations are being disrupted through technology. Also, along with starting that, one of the things I did personally was do my own startup, trying to think about really what would the AP be like if you were to create it today, and would you set up all these bureaus around the world and hire journalists everywhere and hire drivers and translators and assistants and create all this overhead? Or would you instead, create something much smaller and try to leverage the fact that now everybody in the world could potentially be a reporter? And that really is kind of the main idea behind Storify, is thinking about how can we take that huge, flood of citizen-generated media from all over the world in all different formats and apply journalistic standards to it, to curate it, to find the best, to put it into context, and to tell stories. So this is the Storify homepage, and we created this editing tool where you can search all different social networks, and this is what the behind-the-scenes dashboard looks like. That's open for anybody to use. It's free to search social networks like, again, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Flickr, Google, and drag and drop elements that you want into your story, put text around it, and then publish that. And when you publish it, you can then take it and embed it on any website. So your story can now itself become this new object that can be embedded all across the web and shared in other places. So some examples of things that are important that might otherwise get lost. This is one of our most quoted tweets of the year from last year, actually. This was from Pakistan, this guy saying, "Go away, helicopter, before I take out my giant swatter." And, so what is this guy talking about? Well, it turned out he was in Abbottabad and he was live tweeting the Osama bin Laden raid, right? And he sent this whole series of tweets not knowing what was going on, talking about explosions, and it's kind of weird that it's happening at this time of night. It turns out there was a reporter basically covering this event, which was obviously the largest news story of the year. And, even in something which you would think, there couldn't possibly be somebody who happened to be there reporting on it, there actually was. So it kind of illustrates, again, the power of what's out there when you look. And this was used in lots of stories on Storify. This is another interesting, this is kind of what a completed story looks like. And it's hard to show because this is a really long timeline. You have to go and look at it online. I'll be happy to give you the link. But, last year was obviously this incredible year where we saw developments from Tunisia to Egypt to the Occupy protests to Russian protests. I mean, it was this whole world of protesters last year, the year of protest, right? As Time magazine, named the protester the person of the year. So this story by Reuters social media editor, he went through the whole year of social media and pulled together the tweets from the ground, the video from the bridge in Cairo where the protesters clashed with the police, the White House tweeting about Obama on the phone with Mubarak of Egypt and talking about the situation. All this media is in this timeline. Otherwise, it'd be really kind of hard to find it all now. A year later, it's basically impossible to find most of this stuff simply because there is so much of it. So this was a kind of fascinating look at the entire year. Steve Jobs dying was another huge story, obviously, last year. And this quote was in a story from the Daily Beast where they talked to, well, actually, no, they didn't talk to. They quoted a bunch of Apple employees who were, talking about this news and how it affected them. And again, they couldn't have really roamed around the Apple campus to ask people what they thought, and they're based in New York anyway. But they were able to put together all this reaction using social media and finding what people were saying and put it into a story in Storify. We have lots of people doing stories for events that affect a lot of people. That seems to generally, obviously, on social media be the things that rise up, like weather. A lot of people obviously being affected by that, or natural disasters, earthquakes. So this is a couple of stories by the Washington Post and the Weather Channel. But another really interesting use we found, too, is kind of in organizing and for advocacy. And I'm showing a story from the White House, but this actually works for journalism, too. the White House, was pushing for this tax extension for payroll taxes, and it would effectively mean that every person would get $40 more a year. And so the White House set up this hashtag, and Obama himself called on people, tell us your stories, tell us what you think about this, use the hashtag $40. And then the White House used Storify to amplify the voices that they thought were important, those personal stories about how this would affect people, and put it together in Storify, also embedded it on the White House. So, we've kind of seen this really interesting evolution in how people think about stories. This was a story that was, they plant the seeds and then they kept adding to it over time. So I think it's really amazing to me to see how now on the web we're really going beyond a static story, something that would be similar to what you would do on paper, but are able to create these stories that are social, dynamic, they evolve over time, they evolve based on the interchange between the writer and the audience, and how that flows, and I think that's where we have really huge potential to go forward with this. So that's just kind of a start of things. This is my email if you'd like to talk more, and thank you very much.
Thanks. So my name is Sahar, and I work with Hosh Media. I'm going to talk about my transition from traditional journalism to the digital platform Hosh Media. But before that, I want to show you a video that kind of explains the platform. That gives a good overview of our platform, and then I want to tell you about my transition from traditional journalism to this. So, oh, by the way, these are our Twitter handles if you want to tweet. So, 7 years ago, when I was starting as a broadcast reporter in Pakistan, I met this young couple, Rabia and Vakar. They met in Islamabad and fell in love. And the 23-year-old's father did not approve of the match, so they eloped. And then the girl's father did what a lot of parents in Pakistan do in elopement cases. He went to the police. Even though both of these two were of legal age and they had committed no crime, the police issued an arrest warrant for the groom and his whole family for kidnapping Rabia. That's how these two, 18-year-old Quresha and her husband, ended up in jail. They were related to their groom. When I met these two, they had been rotting in jail for a whole month for a crime they did not commit, but also for a crime that never took place. I exposed this injustice and helped them get out of jail. But for decades, stories like these were in the shadows in Pakistan because they were complicated and we only had one state broadcaster. But 10 years ago, our media was liberated, and now we have 24 independent news channels. The possibilities seemed endless, but soon after I met these young couples, the news in Pakistan shifted gear. It became all about breaking news and confirming death tolls. In 6 years, I covered countless bombings, 7 hostage situations, 3 elections, 3 natural disasters, and a state of emergency. It was overwhelming for me, a young journalist. I could only imagine how it was for the rest of the majority of Pakistan, the youth. 2 in 3 Pakistanis are under 30 years old, but their voices are missing from our media. So that's where kind of Hosh comes in. Hosh means to awaken. And one of our goals is to tap into the growing Facebook population in Pakistan. So a year ago, we were only 2 million Facebook users, and now we are 6 million. And so this is our logo, and Hosh means to awaken in Urdu. And we launched our platform a year ago through design thinking at Stanford University, where we prototyped and user tested. And our users can now upload any content, videos, images, and thoughts. And then our team of volunteer editors and contributors, they go through the content and produce stories which we sell to mainstream media. These are some stories we've published over the last year. We also conduct mentoring workshops. These are some images from a workshop that we conducted, and we also do mentoring via Skype and email. This is one of our young contributors. She's 23 years old, and she's like our success story. She came to us uploading images, photos, basically, and now she's getting published as a features writer. Her latest piece documents Pakistan's lost Sikh history. So we have this very interesting business model where we create this content and then syndicate it to mainstream media, and Kolsoom is going to talk a bit about that.
Hey everyone, can you hear me? Does this work? I'm Kolsoom, and I'm actually the founder of Invest to Innovate, or Eye to Eye. And what we do is we're an intermediary, so we're not an investor ourselves, but we do is we identify early stage social enterprises in new markets starting in Pakistan. We provide capacity development support to grow those businesses, and we connect them to capital, so either philanthropic, grant capital, or investment. And so what's been interesting, and Hosh Media is actually one of our enterprises, so kind of working, talking to you a little bit about business models. Most of the enterprises that come to us tend to be more agriculture related, energy related, stuff that's like working in markets that are pretty established, and looking at innovations within that. So we've had some pretty exciting ideas. But when I first met Hosh, it was really interesting for me because I just found it to be a really compelling model. What's been interesting, especially for myself, I'm actually been a citizen blogger for some time, so having kind of that background. So when Sahar and I first met, I was really interested because a lot of crowdsourced news that we see nowadays, there's been such oversaturation, but just this growing proliferation of crowdsourced news websites. This one, that's the picture that's up there, is of All Voices, which actually rivaled CNN iReport and a couple of major news agencies in terms of their content and the volume and the traffic that they were getting to their website. But I think the problem that happens a lot with these crowdsourced news sites is that the more of them that exist out there, the harder it is to really think about revenue generation, and not thinking about it from a profit-making point of view, but just thinking about how to make an enterprise sustainable. So rather than being dependent on grants or on donations, really thinking about a business model that works. And so what's been interesting is even seeing how the mainstream media like CNN, Gannett, BBC have all kind of realized that there's a huge market opportunity that exists with citizen journalism. From obviously the point of view of people not wanting to just be consumers of the news, but actually wanting to be engaged and active producers of the news. So we see CNN iReport and, obviously platforms that exist that engage users, but not really, again, like they're not paying the citizen journalists. It seems to be just part of their model. And so what was interesting about Hosh is that they recognized that there was a market opportunity. There were mainstream media outlets in Pakistan, as Sahar noted. There's just this growing amount of electronic media outlets in Pakistan. But if you go to see a lot of their attempts at engaging citizen journalists, it's very, amateur in a lot of ways, like very immature blog sites and everything. And so what Hosh realized that they had is that rather than using themselves as the platform, the only platform that was the end, they became the conduit or the means to the end. So connecting and training citizen journalists on the ground in Pakistan. So through mentorship, through face-to-face trainings, and connecting and amplifying those voices on mainstream media outlets. What was really interesting from our point of view was the fact that the syndication model, which was Dawn.com currently in Pakistan, pays for the content, and now other media outlets are looking to Hosh and actually paying for the content that they're generating. So kind of looking at that revenue stream, which is really interesting. And obviously the model is really unique. But what I hope we can discuss today is just either like really coming up with kind of creative revenue streams, which is mainstream media outlets have had to do that, as well as now citizen journalism outlets, just in order to remain sustainable. For Hosh, even looking at the role of the diaspora, with Pakistan, especially since in Pakistan the diaspora has really just been interesting in terms of the amount of remittances that have gone back, that have actually quadrupled in the last 8 years, despite the country becoming increasingly more volatile as an environment and becoming less of a better investor environment. And so using that as a development opportunity, using the connections that the diaspora has, even from their own experiences living in the US or living in the UK, and understanding kind of the value of what citizen journalism can bring, and this type of new media, and being able to kind of leverage that experience, that mentorship ability, as well as that type of money that goes back, in order to really kind of help these platforms.
So it's been really interesting as a journalist and seeing all the transitions that have been happening in the industry to kind of play with this model. But for us, the core mission really is focusing on the majority of the youth in Pakistan and making sure that their voices start rewriting Pakistan's narrative, so that, there's more to us than all the breaking news headlines that you normally see about terrorism or, finding Osama bin Laden. And these people end up becoming the face of Pakistan for the world.
Excellent. So my name is Tugade, and Kathleen mentioned that I lead the news vertical at Ustream. We're a live video company. What I really feel privileged about with my work is that I come from a feature film background, working with Francis Coppola, where my job was to read all the screenplays that came across his desk and make recommendations on which ones he might want to back. And now for Ustream, my job, again, is to find the best stories being told around the world at any given moment. And it's incredibly empowering to see the bravery and courage of citizen journalists in Syria, in Egypt, Russia, Tunisia, Greece, Israel, Occupy Wall Street, and to see the power that technology has and the tools that are available to those to best tell their story. What I'm going to show you now is a highlight reel of the top 10 live moments that were across Ustream that include citizen journalists as well as live videos of animals and sports and entertainment, just to give you an overview of the technology and platform that we offer. And then I will delve deeper into the specifics as to how citizen journalists have really changed the landscape of storytelling. Just expand it.
And liftoff, the final liftoff of Atlantis. On the shoulders of the space shuttle, America will continue the dream.
Program, Houston. Roger, roll, Atlantis. Houston now controlling the flight of Atlantis.
When are you leaving? Where are you going? Where are you going? When are you leaving? Where are you going? Where are you going?
Tension, and he drops it. There's the dad. Will it do it? Baylon, fairly resilient. I think he'll live. And this is Latif's tournament life right here.
And he just runs away.
Options out of it, and now has cornered himself. I do not like this from Latif. He had his chance.
So where are you going? When are you leaving? Where are you going?
wins.
I want to thank the over 8 million people who have tuned in to watch 24 Hours.
Houston now controlling the flight of Atlantis. The space shuttle spreads its wings one final time for the start of a sentimental journey into history.
Even better.
We are aware that the governor has declared a state of emergency for the entire state of New Jersey.
Evolution 2011 champion, Buddha!
And look at the Japanese player.
Put this on your social networks. Let everybody know. We're going to be live all night, as long as it takes.
For better, for worse. For richer, for poorer. In sickness and in health.
Live to the world.
All right.
Right, thank you for indulging me in that. So let me show you how easy it is for citizen journalists to go live. It's basically a platform onto which anyone with an Android or iPhone and an internet connection can go live and basically create their own broadcast, their own network on Ustream. So the first step is to download the app from either the App Store or on the Android's Google Play. You create an account, and I know there are some questions about anonymity. Whatever information you'd like to provide is all you necessarily have to give. And then there's a Go Live button. We're really encouraging citizen journalists from around the world when they're about to go live to inform us of that very moment. And then what happens is we get to work and we push it across our distribution network of 54 million monthly unique users across the globe. At any given moment on Ustream, there are 9,000 broadcasts happening. So I'll give you an example of how it's been used. Most recently, here in America was NATO this past weekend in Chicago. And this Occupy citizen journalist, his name is Timothy Poole. He actually was one of the citizen journalists who was at Zuccotti Park. And when the mainstream media press didn't have access to certain locations in lower Manhattan, he got in there with his Samsung Galaxy phone and he went live for 31 straight hours. So he became the source for news during that time. And what's great about Ustream is that it's fully integrated with Facebook and Twitter. There's a community of viewers here who, this is an example of a Russian citizen journalist who's actually off air now. But when a viewer is watching a live broadcast, they can engage with that broadcaster. Actually, he is live now. It's about 500 people. It's loading in. When they post a comment in the social stream, which is integrated with Facebook and Twitter, that automatically syndicates onto their own social networks. So as you can see now, Rega Mortis, who is in Moscow right now, who is live from his mobile phone. You see the cascade of conversation that's happening here, and it's getting posted virally at this moment on Twitter and Facebook. What's interesting about Rega Mortis is right after the re-elections a couple weeks ago in Russia, his channel was disabled. And then we started to see more activity. A lot of Russian citizen journalist channels were then offline. And then the entire Ustream.tv was taken down for 5 hours. And to further what was spoken this morning, these kinds of DDoS attacks usually happen around the time of elections. This particular citizen journalist, Rigor Mortis, he was very vocal leading up to the elections of his opposition thereof. And we worked really hard for 5 hours. Our engineers are in Hungary, and it was a cat and mouse game. And we finally got back up and we're on a stable. And as soon as that happened, we translated the entire Ustream site into Russian, which I'm sure they weren't pleased about on that side of the world. Let me show you another citizen journalist collective out of Russia. They're called Ritus. And this is an example. This happened last week. Protesters were giving others in the area food and water. And at this moment that was captured, the police were arresting them for doing so. And what happened was it started to engage this global conversation again. Everybody's from Russia all across the world were in this global conversation about what was going on at this very moment. And there was a lot of mainstream media, again, who then sourced this content as to what's real and authentic at that given moment. I wanted to show you as well how citizen journalists are sustaining themselves. We enable widgets within the Flash player. Here, Ritus decided to have it draw directly to their website. And because these players are embeddable, you can take the embed code and put it anywhere that you like. Here's the embed code here. But oftentimes, a lot of our citizen journalists use their widget to go to a donations page, PayPal, or it could probably even link to one of yours or to Storify or whatever other social media they'd like to use. And then lastly, what I wanted to show you before we go into a Q&A is what we call a super channel. In a world where there are breaking events that are happening, it's really important to show various POVs of the same event. And that's really where the power of Ustream is, and live video and images. Everybody is watching the same event, but they're seeing it through their own eyes. And our super channel aggregates this information. And this is an aggregation of Syrian citizen journalists when they had the opportunity. And it was really empowering to see, again, the courage and the bravery they had to put themselves in the firing line, literally, and to tell their story to the world. And so, again, I'm really happy and proud to be a part of this distinguished group here these past couple days, and I would love to answer any questions that you have regarding Ustream and to help in your causes and support your missions as well.
Thank you very much. Before we get one more story and one more storyteller from Iran, perhaps it would be nice to take some questions from the audience. Yes?
Yes, hello. I'm a journalist and also an activist from Moscow, and I have participated in some of the parties that you've shown there. And I wonder, how do you rate the technical and creative performance of Russian journalists online as compared, say, to others? Is it good? Is it average? Have you found any unique features to it?
You're asking me that question? I actually am very, very impressed with the quality of their work. It's not up right now, but they are... Oh, there it is. Okay. So they're in very close communications with me. They're very eager to tell their story with the rest of the world. They invest lots of time and energy in quality productions. And they also understand what it is to tell a great story. So whether it's reading a screenplay or reading a blog post. It's really these universal human stories of struggle and connection, whether you speak Russian or English or Arabic. To display that clearly, I think, especially with rightists and rigor mortis, they're so passionate about what it is that they're trying to communicate, and so that crosses all language barriers. So I'm impressed by the Russian citizen journalists, indeed. He certainly is. He certainly is, and he loves the camera too, on Skype. Yeah, there he is. He's live now, so you can see the social stream is really taking off right now.
Patrick Butler with the International Center for Journalists. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the pay structure for Hosh. You mentioned that Dawn is a client. How does that work? How do they, what's the structure for that? How did you get them? And how are you working on other media? And what's the reaction from them?
So I was working as a mainstream journalist in Pakistan for quite a few years, so I have contacts. So when I decided to launch this portal, our first story I pitched to Dawn.com, and they agreed to buy it. So what we do right now is we pitch story by story. We haven't scaled that much yet, so we've sold a few dozen stories to them. But our long-term goal is to graduate to a syndication model where we produce 40 stories a month and sell the same stories to 10 or 15 different organizations, kind of like a newswire. And the way we're working right now is, so we are working with contributors and bridging the gap between blogging and journalism. So it takes a lot of mentoring sessions for them before they can actually get published. But our long-term goal is we have this whole process, stage by stage, where our contributors start as tipsters and they go to tipmasters, then they eventually become Hoshiar reporters. So when they reach the stage of Hoshiar reporters, we want to give them a percentage of each sale.
So let me introduce briefly Nick Kausar, who's a journalist and a cartoonist. Come right up, Nick. From Iran. He was jailed for his storytelling and his political cartoons, and has continued on here in the United States as a working journalist, focusing mostly on cartoons and animation and the power of those for storytelling. He's come up with some really interesting new ways of enabling those stories to be told in Farsi, and he wanted to share a little bit today about how what he's doing is impacting the media landscape and how people can get involved.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Kausar. I'm traditionally a cartoonist, but also a journalist as well. And I went to prison for drawing a cartoon, so it's not that much fun to work in Iran as a journalist or a cartoonist. I drew a crocodile that resembled the name of an Ayatollah, so it caused a national security crisis. And that was not that bad. Just 6 days in Evin prison, if you know what Evin prison is. We started Khodnevis in 2009. It's a citizen journalism platform, and we have around 7,000 members. A great group of Iranian journalists who had to leave Iran after the 2009 elections are helping us, and other sources within the country. And we have been trying to reach out to people inside the country, and we have pretty good sources, and they have helped us actually break a few stories that the mainstream media were actually not able to even talk about them. But what we started in 2011, and we're still working on it, is a service called Khodetuns. Khodnevis that we first started, Khod means self, Nevis means writing, so self-writing. But this is Khodetuns, Khod self-tunes cartoon. So, of course, people cannot draw cartoons themselves easily. But like our artist over here is a cartoonist. But how many people in the world actually draw cartoons? A minority. So we try to create this very easy service that if I just drag a character, like this is former President Khatami, and let me go and let's Mr. Death. And then I put a background here. Of course, it's in Persian. It's the alley of Vilayat al-Faqih, if you know Vilayat al-Faqih. The Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, is the he has the last word. He's above the law. So this is in his alley. And then Mr. Khatami over here talks to Death. And okay. And then Death is saying, oh, what the BS he's talking about. You can type whatever you want here in Persian or in English. But we're working on it. It's still in the beta phase. So we're still working on it to have a better, first better fonts and more characters. We only have about 30-something characters over here that I drew last year in a very short period of time. But we're thinking of actually adding characters. And Kathleen said, why don't you have more characters and women over here? That's right. We have one or two women here. Let me just show you. This is, let me replace, this is Hashemi Rafsanjani's daughter, who's a politician as well, and she's going to go to prison for 6 months. So anybody can type whatever. And then what happens is that after the cartoon is posted by the member and then approved by the editors, because they have to be moderated still. We're in the first phases. So the members can actually post these automatically on Facebook. And what happens is such a cartoon gets about 165,000 views. Of course, we're still working on it, but we hope that in the future we could actually have different users from all around the world, actually, even adding cartoon characters to this, like cartoonists from other countries. I've spoken to cartoonists in Tunisia and Egypt, and I hope to get more help from cartoonists all around the world to post a lot of politicians over here. So people all around the world can have a voice. We're starting with Iran and Iranian audiences, but we hope to get to reach to more audiences in the future. Thank you.
Nick, what do you think the power of participation could be for ordinary people in this way? What motivated you to go from being a cartoonist and journalist yourself to creating the frameworks and the platforms for everybody to be one?
Coming from the Iranian media, I can say that independence is something that we lack in the Iranian media. Even in the Persian media out of the country, they're mostly attached to different parties. And whatever is published in the online media or the media inside Iran, you don't hear the voices of the people and what people actually are talking about. It's the conversation that the politicians want to go out. So we thought that, okay, by creating Khodnevis as a platform, that could help. And then we thought that, people have the much better ideas than many of us as cartoonists working in the papers. But, sorry, I don't mean to ruin your business, and mine, of course. But there are a lot of beautiful ideas that don't get a chance actually being posted on websites or being published. So when New Yorker has this page that you can send your own caption to the editor over there, and then the best one will be chosen, why couldn't we do this? This had been done in I think Croatia for a mayor's for a city council or mayoral election campaign, or a competition, or I don't know. And we thought that, we can do this in a better way and reach out to millions of people inside Iran and outside Iran. So, of course, for sure this is filtered inside Iran. We have to think about different ways to reach out to people. Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes.
Maybe for Burt, I was just wondering if I have some young friends and older friends too, they're maybe going into journalism and they want to know where can they get paid to be a journalist. Because that's up in the air, right?
That's a big question, yeah.
I would say multimedia. That's the first thing I tell young journalist students, because I think before it used to be very beat-oriented, and I think a lot of journalism schools, even in the U.S., they still focus on broadcast or print. But I think the future in job security is in multimedia, all the platforms. So that's one skill advice I always give.
But yeah, I guess I would still say, I mean, good writing is important, and there's a need for that. I think maybe also being more specialized is key. I mean, I don't think there's as much of a role for general journalists who can just cover anything. I think if you can establish yourself as an expert in covering a certain narrow topic, I mean, then that can be really powerful. Then you don't even need to have a media organization behind you necessarily, because you could start your own site where you just cover this issue if you can get enough of an audience and then build the, advertising targeted towards that narrow, topic. That can actually be a sustainable thing for a very small organization. That's really what we see with all the blogs that have emerged as major news sources, like for the tech industry, I mean, obviously, or Politico covering politics here. I mean, if you go narrow in a certain topic, I think that can be more powerful. But yeah, in terms of skills too, I mean, bringing together coding and journalism, working with data journalism, I mean, that's a lot of jobs at news organizations now. They're trying to hire people who get that, who understand how to work with big data sets and do things with that. That's not conventional journalism. I mean, I'm not saying every journalist has to learn how to code and become a statistician, but if you can, there are definitely opportunities there.
This is in 2007 when I graduated. This is before blogging was widely accepted. It was still taboo. But this might be going down a slippery slope here. But do you think? I think that you guys are such great examples, having started your own news agencies, and the other people I know who have been the most successful journalists have started their own websites, started their own news agencies, gotten grants from the Knight Foundation. Do you think there should be an aspect in grant writing or public relations at journalism school? I mean, that's kind of like steering people away from journalism, but that's what you need to do what you've done, to get money from companies.
Actually, the Columbia School of Journalism in New York produced an entire report on this subject after investigating where their graduates end up and looking at the field. And one of the findings was that graduating journalists needed to understand better the basic tenets of small business, and that they needed to be more entrepreneurial, and they needed skills to be entrepreneurs in order to be really effective vocational-led journalists. So that was a really interesting study that essentially helped drive, and I believe it was also in collaboration with the Knight Foundation.
I think business approaches more than necessarily grant writing, because I think grant writing is great and it's definitely a good skill to have, but I think if you start to think a little bit more business minded, if you start looking at revenue generation, like that kind of stuff, I think that tends to be a little bit more, I think, better for organizations that are starting now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess obviously there was this wall between business and editorial that seems to be fading, and I always felt like I want to understand how the business works, but you're told at the AP or other news organizations, don't worry about it, it's not your problem, but it is your problem if then the jobs are all going away. So I think, yeah, journalists should learn some of this, and you can do it in a way where it does not necessarily compromise your objectivity or anything like that. I mean, I think, again, it's important to find a way to sustain yourself. And yeah, I agree. It's not just grants. It could be getting investors from private investors. I mean, like we did with Storify, it's funded by Silicon Valley venture capital. So learning that type of skill, like pitching and how to get in with that crowd is important too.
So both Burt and I were Knight Fellows at Stanford University, and their program focuses on innovation and entrepreneurship. And I don't know about Burt, but Hosh wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone through that year of going to business school classes and the D School at Stanford, which focuses on design thinking.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was a great help to do that, where, I mean, you're in Silicon Valley where everybody's telling you, start your own thing. What do you have to lose? And this is how you can do it. So, you really kind of are inspired to do that. I think more journalists should go for it and try things and see where they get.
I think it's also an interesting point because there are so many amazing platforms that are being started. We had someone in our workshop yesterday that was talking about a media collective in Egypt. I think there's also room for collaboration too. I think entrepreneurship has become this really sexy buzzword. Everyone's like, start your own thing and do your own thing. And then I think there's also room for joining forces, like partnering with other organizations so you're not also reinventing the wheel, because I think there's just so much opportunity. There's just so much money that can go around. So even thinking about even how to leverage each other to achieve that, I think is good too.
What do you think of crowdfunded models? Are you looking into that?
Yeah, so I think crowdfunding is a really great model especially when you've developed, like with Ustream, you were talking about these people that have had followers and a community around them. Like, I think that crowdfunding is really great. I think what's been really interesting to me, I've been working and partnering with a lot of social ventures that do crowdfunding platforms. One specifically is called Start Some Good, which is around social ventures. And what's been interesting is to see this rebellion against even the word crowdfunding, and they start to use the word peer-to-peer funding, because it's this idea of like you're creating a community, especially when you are a citizen journalism, you're creating a following around you, and at that same time you're eliciting like people from that community to provide support from a financial point of view, from other points of view as well. And I think crowdfunding can really work in that way. I don't necessarily see it as sometimes the most sustainable way. Like, you can't continue to crowdfund your way like through your entire business or your entire model, but I think crowdfunding is a really great way to create or to leverage the community that you've already built.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. A lot of our citizen journalists that's how they're sustaining themselves now. And when they tell a really compelling story, when they specialize in like Occupy Wall Street, for instance, others will take note. We have a citizen journalist who's pretty much being backed by Roseanne Barr. She's very interested in politics these days. Michael Moore as well. They'll see all the tweets, and it'll start to become a trending topic about this broadcast, and it'll be viral across the Twitter sphere. And so then what happens is people with deep pockets who are equally passionate about a particular issue will then retweet that, and they'll get in direct contact with these broadcasters. Regarding one of our nonprofits, the Decorah Eagles, it made internet history. It's the most viewed live video in history at over 260 million views now. They put just a little banner underneath that said, if you'd like to support the Raptor Resource Project, donate here. And within 3 months, they more than quadrupled what they usually expect in a year. And to the point where the executive director had to turn off the PayPal donation page because they were completely overwhelmed. So that's a great example of a successful nonprofit that no longer has to write a grant letter because their camera is on 24/7. They're very involved with the social community, the social stream, the Facebook and Twitter, and they have expert moderators in there sparking more conversation and education about what their mission is, and so they're self-sustaining.
One of the aspects of that seems really interesting is how entirely unexpected that revenue model was. That a lot of this space is still pretty experimental.
Absolutely.
So all of these wonderful innovations rely on connectivity, and they rely on the most engaged of participants, the most connected of participants. What are you doing, and how do you tackle the question of those who are less connected, and where do you think the ball is going? Why don't we start with you, Burt?
Okay, this is a question from yesterday too. I mean, I worked in a lot of countries that did not have, developed like infrastructure where they had political leadership that would not allow freedom of expression, obviously. So I do still think it's important to get, feet on the ground, have reporters who are actually going into these places if the local citizens might get in trouble for speaking openly. So I guess I would not say that that's something we can do away with entirely and replace it with citizen journalism just yet. But no, I think there's a lot of things that you could do now, also leveraging, the fact that in Africa, mobile technology is kind of leapfrogged, and more people are using mobile phones, mobile payment systems, and all this than are using regular laptops or desktop computers. So I think, you could think creatively of ways of using voice and audio in different platforms, and we try to really be agnostic. Actually, in theory, you could take a Storify story and use our API to have it be read and be as audio that you could call up and listen to. So I think there is a chance to do a lot more creative things once you change the way a story is produced and make things that are more dynamic and can be, worked with in different ways.
So internet penetration in Pakistan is only 10%. So that was the whole idea behind Hosh. How do we amplify these youth voices? Because most of the people that are online, especially on Facebook, are young. They're under 25. So that was the whole idea behind taking mainstream media and linking it to citizen journalism. So for it to really have impact in Pakistan, we needed mainstream media. Between our broadcast channels and our newspaper viewership, that way we could reach 70% of the population. So that's kind of how I creatively looked at our connectivity problem. But I think in the future, there are lots of changes we're going to see in the next 10 to 15 years, specifically with mobile. So Pakistan is the largest growing cell phone market in the world. And the future of media really is mobile. And soon, there are already lots of projections saying that most phones are going to be smartphones, which is not the case in Pakistan. But if that's the only phone being made, then most phones will be smartphones. So I think we're going to see a lot of interesting changes in the developing world in the next 15 years in terms of citizen journalism and a kind of a jump in connectivity.
I think the question that was brought up yesterday was even talking about the radio, which I think is really interesting. It was Afia Salam, who's also Pakistani, who's here, and she was mentioning about how radio is actually has the biggest reach, especially in a place like Pakistan, where, as Sahar noted, internet penetration is 10%. Not everyone has the cable news channels to watch a lot of these electronic media outlets. And so thinking about even how to combine mobile and radio together, I'm not sure if it's being done yet, but I think there's an interesting opportunity in how to reach certain populations. I also think the offline-online component is really interesting too. Not everything has to be virtual and online. I think being able to do face-to-face trainings, being able to use online as a means to an end rather than the end, I think is an important component of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, for a platform like Ustream or live videos, it's really contingent on access to smartphones, iOS and Android. And until certain countries have the proper infrastructure for just internet connectivity, our tool is moot. But further to what my colleagues here are saying, there's so many tools at not everyone, but there's so many tools at our disposal to tell a story, and it's just how to use it. With regards to radio, people are just putting the audio on Ustream so that they have access to other countries. We saw the example with Kony 2012. I don't know what the penetration is there in Uganda for internet, but there was an incredible marketing campaign around that cause. So it was a really great way to show how the best of class marketing online, offline can be effective worldwide. Unfortunately, that campaign tapered off. But at the moment, the 2 weeks that it was alive, it really showed us what we could do together as a global community.
Yes. My name is Jahan. I'm also from Pakistan. I represent an organization called Bolo Free. I think what Sahar was saying about the internet population in Pakistan is about 116 million right now, the mobile phone penetration. And it's not just smartphones. Nokia, for instance, has just launched a mobile phone which costs about $40. And it has internet access, it has video capture, it has camera capture, IM, chat, everything. So I think many of the phone companies and even the tablets coming out of China, etc., are going to enable people with lower incomes in emerging markets to be able to access a lot of media. And also it's important to remember that literacy also plays into this, because a lot of people don't read or don't have an education. And so the video side of things, the audio capability in these phones will result in a lot of demand for citizen journalism and information, whether it is to do with politics, entertainment, or health, or any kind of learning. That's already begun to happen, and I think Sahar, it won't take 10 to 15 years. It's already begun. So I think that kind of revolution is taking place right now.
Yeah, it's all moved much faster than just about anybody predicted. Please join me in thanking Burt, Sahar, Kolsoom and Ruby for sharing their stories today.